Okay, in this video, I'm going to show you how to do the bookmark example that we have on the sheet of paper. It looks like this. It's a little bit smaller, but it still works kind of in the same principle. So if you noticed on this one right here is that there is a white border around the whole thing and a heavier white border on the bottom. It's kind of optional. It's a little bit more of a preference that you could have on there. The way I get that is I use this painter's tape. You can probably get some from me from school. I'm learning how to teach things a little more virtually. So I'm sorry if you don't have this, because what I'm doing now is I'm taking this and wrapping it around like a toilet paper and then cutting it in sections so then you can take some home with you without having to give you a whole roll when you only need like a real small amount of it. You should have your wood board that you want to tape things down onto. So I'm going to take this. I'm looking at the top of here. I want to drop down like a ½ inch, maybe 3/4 of an inch, depending on how much room you actually have on that, and then tape that down. Try to make that as even as you possibly can. I'm going to do it on the sides here. So I'm overlapping it like this, trying to get it all lined up, and then I'm going to bring it in. You know, the tape is transparent enough that I can see it and be able to go through that. Or be able to lay it down so I know that it's not this, massively crooked piece of tape that's on there. Same thing, line it up, bring it over, try and keep everything pretty close to being the same. And what's nice about this one is that you should be able to pull this off easily as you pull it away from here so you don't rip this. Sometimes it rips it a little bit, but it's not like regular masking tape. Depending on the brand that you have on this, kind of makes a big difference. Now, I'm not going to lay tape all this whole thing. I like to have a pretty heavy white bottom on here. So I'm going to leave this alone. I don't need to tape all that up. It's just kind of a waste of tape. So this becomes my painting area. So we're going to do a couple techniques that we've already kind of demonstrated before on how to do this in terms of when you start doing those swatches. So we're going to do wet on wet. We're going to do mainly wet on wet and wet on dry and kind of work with our intensity. So first off, I know that, I'm going to have water here. I'm going to have a couple mountains. So I'm going to draw a mountain line right here. And yours doesn't have to look exactly like this. There's another mountain here, and then a third one kind of peeking up around here. By having this formation, you then have your foreground, middle ground, and background. And then you create this sense of depth. Now I'm going to take my brush. I like the blue mountain, so I'm going to stay with that. So I'm going to go to Phthalo Blue. And so the front one is the most intense of a color that we have on that. So I'm going to bring that in. This is where you definitely want to have like scrap paper. I have a few of these pieces left. So I kind of know if something is too intense or not. And I think that's fine. So I'm going to bring this up. Right now, this is a wet on dry technique because I'm trying to keep this line here alone. And I can kind of bring this down a little bit. So this is going to be my most intense blue. And then it's going to be hitting the water at some point, probably around that area. So I'm going to get a little more color and try to create a better, cleaner line. That's going to be my shoreline. And this is where I would probably stop this video, so you can kind of go to the next step. Unless you just want to watch this to the end and then re-watch it again, whatever kind of works for you. Now you can overwork paper, so you got to be a little careful of that. And that should, it's a little rough right now. I'm going to try to smooth this off a little bit. But I think when this dries, it would level out a little bit anyways. Okay, so that's my first one. I want to get a little more depth in that. So if you remember, so what I want to erase some of it out is I have a pretty clean brush right now, is I'm going to go in and just kind of soak this up. Clean it off, dry it off, come back in. So again, this is kind of how you erase or even kind of create layers. So again, I have a cup of water, and then I have a rag that I just I take the rag and let me bring the rag over here for a second. And I just go back and forth like that and just kind of clean that up, okay? Now I could grab some more water and try to soak this up even more, but I feel like that's pretty good. So it just creates something so it's not, you know, a super flat blue. Okay, the one above it is going to be kind of the same way. I'm going to add a little bit of a wet on there. See, right now this was a little green because my water is pretty dirty. I'm going to switch it out with another cup of water here because I don't want to contaminate this stuff too much. Okay, so that's a nicer, lighter blue. And I do like to have a little bit darker on top, and then as I come down, I like to have it a little bit lighter. Now this is still a wet on dry. I got to be a little careful when I get close to the edge of that mountain below me, so I don't hit it, because then it'll seep some of that colorant in. I don't really want that right now. So I did not put any more pigment on here. I'm just grabbing extra water because I have plenty of blue. Okay, and I'm going to go real close to that edge without touching it. I feel like I did a good job with that. Come up here, grab this last little part. There you go. Okay, and my last one, you know what? I'm not even really gonna go in. I have this, piece here I tested a color out. I'm not even gonna add any more color to this because I want this one to be pretty light blue. Because usually the farther things get away from you, the hazier they'll look. So that's why this one's so intense, and then why this mountain that's supposed to be in the background is supposed to be even lighter. So I added no extra blue. I went over, grabbed a little bit over there, or whatever was already on my brush, just because I want a super, super light blue. And this was all that Thalio, so T-H-A-L. T-H-A-L. There's like a piece of hair right there. I'm trying to get it out. There we go. So even the most subtleties of color make a drastic difference. Good. Okay. So I have that. And so this was basically a wet on dry area because I didn't put this stuff down. Now up here I will. So I'm going to use a gray and a green because I did like the colors, how they turned out. So the gray that I have was like a Payne's gray. I'm trying to see it on my palette. There it is. So I see it on my palette. This one I am going to do more of a wet on dry, or wet on wet. So I got that hair on there. So I'm going to lay this down. Not too much, but just enough. And then I'm going to take the gray, just grab a little bit of it. Testing the colors out here, and I think I'm good to go. So I know horizon lines, are pretty much, when you do the sky, you go left to right. When you work with watercolor, white is such an important color because I'm going to start using my paint palette here. Let me kind of bring this over because I'm going to lay this down so you can see it. And I can get my intensity a little bit more in terms of what I want by testing it on here, okay? But and now I'm kind of going into a wet and dry because there's no wet down here. Now, if I had the ability, I would flip this around and try to get this angled better. I'm gonna go in and lay some water down. But leaving white paper is super important with watercolors. because you need that white to make your design successful. And if all of a sudden you just get rid of all of your white, you don't have a paper showing, it's going to look awfully elementary-ish, kind of. So you want to control that. So you get these kind of fun shapes, these negative shapes that you wouldn't normally have gotten. Okay, now I'm going to start transitioning into a green, and I think I used a sap green. Yep. So I'm going to bring this palette back over again. I took this sap, bring this over, to kind of find what I want. And then I'm going to bring this in. Now this is all dry up here. I'm going to add some more water. Leaving areas that are white. And you can choose whatever color you want. You might not like my color options, and that's perfectly okay. I'm just looking on kind of technique, and one big thing I'm looking up here is you leaving white and trying to find the importance of that. And right now I'm kind of demonstrating, the wet on wet technique by getting some, straight color, bringing this in to try to get that a little more intense. Probably be a little bit too intense, but it's not that big a deal. Hopefully you're finding parts of painting class relaxing. With anything you learn that's new, it can be kind of frustrating, but you want to kind of develop that confidence to be able to just sit back and kind of enjoy things. Okay, so I got the mountain done, I got the sky done. Let's do the water down below. So I'm cleaning my brush. I'm actually going to clean it out completely by dumping the water away, rinsing the brush out, or rinsing the water out and grabbing a completely brand new cup of water right there. Okay, this again is going to be kind of a wet on dry. I'm sorry, wet on wet. So I'm going to lay some down here. So I'm just laying down water. So then I can go back with my phthalo blue. And come in, create these ocean waves that are supposed to be running against the shore here. Now, I liked the idea of having like deeper or stronger colors. So I have a lot of phthalo blue right on the tip of my brush. So I can go in and get these lines that are much more intense. And I'm actually going to go in with my paper clip to create more lines. Do that again, have more blue on there. Get a little more water. Make sure I'm working the sides a little bit and not just ending, like a ½ inch every single time. And this is almost like scumbling a little bit because this is, my brush is kind of dry and I'm just barely going across. Okay. I'm gonna let this dry for about 5–10 minutes, and I'm gonna come back and use my Sharpie to start getting the rest of the tree here, okay? Okay, going in and feeling this, you can see that all the watercolor is dried. So this I let this dry for about 15–20 minutes. Again, I would almost wait for a day if you have the chance, if you're not in a rush. Otherwise, if you are in a rush, you can kind of wait that long. You just want to make sure that you can easily use your ultrafine sharp marker for this part of the project. Okay, so next step. If you look at the tree, you're going to see that it has this natural curl, like a curve into it to create a little bit more of energy behind there instead of just having like a tree that's like a straight up and down stick. So I'm going to use a pencil first to get an idea where that's at. And I guess before I even do that, let's take the tape off. I'm going to lift up pull this away from there. That's always how you use painter's tape. You don't want to rip into there just in case it catches, but you always kind of pull away from it. Good on this side. And painter's tape does have kind of a life, not a life expectancy, but they tell you within like X amount of days you should be kind of peeling it off. The sooner the better. I think sometimes they say within 7 days you should do it. I think the higher the quality, the longer you can have. But this one pulled out pretty nicely. I did realize I kind of messed up here. So if you notice, the watercolor got underneath there because I did not press down hard enough on there. So I kind of ruined that part of there. So, but again, it kind of is what it is. So looking at this and this one, I'm going to lay out my tree. So I'm going to start here, curve up and around, and then back again. So you have this kind of this S curve going into it. What's nice about having these empty spots on this side and this side is you can start coming up with additional branches that come off of these main curves and then off of that. And then all of a sudden it has kind of another three-dimensional feel to it because of the way that it breaks out of that painting frame. Okay, and that's one thing why I always thought these were kind of cool, is because it does look like the tree is a part of the design as a whole, but then all of a sudden it kind of breaks out of that fake frame that you put onto it. It's just kind of a cool element on there. So in order to kind of get a good grade in this one, what we're shooting for, which you hopefully probably learned in middle school, is going in and getting these really fine lines that are on there. So you always want to do a tree, you always go from like a thick to a thin. So I'm going to take this marker, I'm going to go in, get this. Try not to hesitate when you do these curves because you want to keep them as graceful as you can. And then you may start filling in the thicker parts of this tree as we go along with this. Now I'm going to go in and just fill in these spots, trying to keep the outside of the tree nice and smooth. And anytime I start breaking from that tree branch, is that you want to go from a thick back to a thin again. And you never want to have a branch who's thicker than the part that's coming from your tree, because then that's just not, it just doesn't look right because it's not real. So I'm going in and filling this in. Again, really paying attention to the outside quality line of this branch. And then if you notice, when I come up, I'm going to look at this other side here real quick. I'm going to add another one here. When I come off of it, you can kind of see that I just don't take the pen off, but I kind of swoosh it off. That'll create a point at the end of it, which will make it look even more realistic. Okay, so thin, then a medium, and then it gets thicker and thicker, and then you hit the main branch, and then it's really thick. Let me come up here, look at this one, see that this one has a break here. And again, trees are all different, so yours does not have to look like mine. You can have different branches. I would still highly recommend this S-curve to show some movement. I have those in place. I'm going to add a little bit one right there. And this one I'm going to kind of fill in a little more on this side. Now if you notice, none of my branches are overlapping. And that's, good or bad. A lot of times when you see designs like this, the branches never overlap, but in real life they do. But that's kind of the fun part of art, is you don't have to mimic real life all the time. There's certain rules that you probably need to follow. In this case, you want to make sure that the trunk is thicker than the branches, but having the branches they don't overlap aren't as big of a deal. Come up here. Okay, I'm going to add another one along this side. And I could continue, but again, that's probably takes me another 20, 30 minutes to finish that up. And I just want to have you a chance to work on yours. Now, looking at the bottom here is like, I do give myself a little bit more shapes here, kind of like more of a grassy area. So this tree, if you notice, is almost like on a smaller island, you know, away from this main part. So I'm going to have a heavy area down here with my pen. And this is where it's like from the techniques you might have already, you might know yourself. It's like I don't necessarily have to fill that whole area in unless you really like that feeling. I do enjoy I guess I do like when it is nice and solid like that. And be able to get that done. Then you would sign it because this is your piece, and then you'll be able to turn this in for a grade. Thank you very much.